Welcome to another episode of Speaking from User Experience. And once again, I have Darrien Staton and Steve Maxson. Darrien is our lead UX UI designer. He's passionate about solving problems through clean, minimal design. And then Steve is our senior UX UI designer, and he believes that UX has the power to influence lives and behaviors in significant ways. And today is going to be really interesting because we're talking about something that I thought was I didn't realize we were talking about two different things. I thought that we were talking about one thing. We're talking about personalization and customization. And prior to the little bit of information that I now have, I thought they were synonymous. And Steve and Darrien quickly told me I don't know what I'm talking about. Mainly Steve told me that. So let's get into it. Let's start with personalization. What is personalization? Why don't Darrien you answer that question?
Okay. Well, personalization is exactly what it sounds like, right? It's when you make content on your website, mobile app, or through ads, right? You personalize it to the user, and it can be done by individuals, it can be for groups, but it's all about matching the needs of the users that you have, right? So I think a good example is like Amazon, right? When you go on Amazon, they suggest recommended material that or items to you based on your previous search history and buying habits, right? So if you've been looking at microphones all day, right? Next time you go on there, they're going to suggest a bunch of different types of microphones that meet your needs. So that's what personalization is, right? It's when the user goes to their website, app, or whatever it is, they're bombarded, or not bombarded, but they're presented, is the correct term, with items or material or ads that they want to see, right? It's not, if you don't like, you're not into cars and stuff like that, and you go to a tech website and all you're seeing is ads about cars, then that's not personalizing to the user, right? So it's buying into their habits and things like that.
Okay. So that's personalization. Then there's customization. Steve, could you tell us what customization is?
Customization is probably easier to explain. It's just the ability to for the user to edit the UI of their software, their interface, whatever you want to call it, in order to better meet the needs that they have. So you see examples like this all the time in software, or just like I guess the easiest example that most people can relate to is your phone. And you whether you have an iOS phone or an Android phone, you're going to be downloading apps, and then you're going to be organizing those into folders, moving those between screens, things like that. That's customization. That's where the user has control of how an interface looks, so that it fits their
Okay, so you said
needs.
something important there. You said the user has control. So it seems like that's the difference. Is what I mean, are there other differences? What's the difference between the two, would you all say? Customization and personalization.
I say that's the biggest difference is that personalization is done by a system, right? A artificial intelligence, right? And customization is done by the user, as in real intelligence, as some people may put it. So it's the two differences.
Yeah, I don't know that I think like AI does can come into play there with the personalization, and we might get into some of those examples later on. But the main thing that, at least like in the UX and in the world that we live in, the term that's thrown around a lot, and this also precedes UX, by the way. This But the term that's thrown around a lot, it's called agency.
Mhm.
And agency is the ability, the power, the control that's given to the user in order to for them to make decisions. I personally do not like this term, because if you go ahead and if you want to, just try to Google that term, and then pair it with words like UX or UI design, and you're not going to find results. You're just going to get bombarded with articles about design agencies, UX agencies, things like that. You're not going to find a really good definition unless you go through page 3, 4, 5 after that. And it's a term that's used, and I don't like to use it because it's not. it's lingo that doesn't really translate to a larger audience. But like, yeah, like the so it's just a matter of giving that control to the user. So it's also been called like empowerment, giving them the ability to change things, and that's the main difference between personalization and
Yeah.
customization.
Now I will say
Is who's the one making that
I
change?
will say there is a difference though, and so both of these are meant to enhance your user experience, right? They both, in a sense, give people more of a personalization, right? Customization and personalization in general, right? Is giving the users more control or personalizing it, like it's you're making it more about them, right? It's about the user, but there's a difference in application for each user, right? For customization, right? These are users who really love this feature, and the reason you're implementing it, right? You're assuming that they have knowledge or that they have information, right? That is important to what they're doing in the UI. Where personalization really comes into play when you're really, it's like a lot in most cases it's used as a recommendation, right? So you're assuming they don't know or need more information or like they need help getting to what they're trying to get to. So I would say your approach and which one you use can change and
That's a
differ
good
too.
segue. Actually, you talk about the different approach. So let's talk about personalization first. Why should you personalize?
Well, there's a ton of reasons. It doesn't mean they always work out, but there's a ton of reasons, right? Um, it increases conversions. If you start getting into bounce rates and drop rates and stuff like that. Uh, it also improves user engagement, right? I think one of the biggest things though is that it drives leads, right? When people come to your site, right, there's a lot of statistics and proven stuff proving that when let's say an ad in this case is more personalized, someone is more likely to click on it, and you're actually more likely to get enticed by the thing that they're going to, right? So that's kind of one of the biggest motivations why people personalize content, right? Is that it either increases conversions or it drives leads. So I would say that's one of the biggest ones, but I think one of the underlying ones, I think from a user designer side, I think is brand loyalty, right? Or the idea that you're showing that to the user that you care and that you care about them, right? And you care about the things that they're interested in, which increases the relationship between you and the user, right? Or that the app they're using, like I'm gonna just pick one, Netflix, for instance, right? A lot of people love Netflix because they don't have to sit there and kind of customize and move things around and keep searching through content. Because there's a lot of movies, right, on Netflix. When you go on there, you're kind of shown your habits, right? If you're really into mystery stuff, you're start to see over time your Netflix is like mostly mystery or and you're like, oh, there's always something for me to watch. It's because you're personalizing it and you're creating a strong bond and you're increasing the relationship between you and the product. So I think that's one of the biggest impacts of
And I
personalization.
remember you mentioned Netflix. I remember hearing that even the thumbnails for the videos are tailored to the user. So you may see a different thumbnail than I see um, for the same movie.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
noticed that. Yeah, I got friends Netflixes that are like it blows my mind how intense it can get. I know people who only watch anime or Asian movies and stuff like that. And when I turned on their Netflix, I thought it was in a different language because everything was only Asian movies. There was no singular American content whatsoever. But it's just because that's all they watch. So you really see the difference the more you check, or like my fiance's and stuff is it's mostly romance and anime and different things like completely different than mine, which is more thrillers and stuff. So I find it very interesting how they do that.
Yeah, it's interesting too to bring up Netflix because they've really tried to go into that personalization maybe further than some of the other like big tech companies out there. Because if you remember, they actually discontinued this service because it was not working. It wasn't giving them the results that they were looking for. But they used to have there was a button that you could click it and then it was like find something for me, or I think they even gave it like a name it sometime. I think it went through some iterations before they axed it, and then you would click it and it would look at the content that you've consumed and then give you recommendations based on that. but then like the trick is, and I think we're going to get to this later though, is like, or like the why it failed is it depends on the user's engagement of other systems, right? Because you might watch something on Netflix, and if you don't give that show a rating, which is like they have the thumbs up, thumbs down, and I think they even have like a love it rating now. I think that I just saw that recently. So like that's like a double thumbs up basically, and then you can scale those however you want. But if you don't engage with that system, then Netflix then is led to have to make some assumptions on your behalf of like, oh well, the user watched it, and then they could go in, and I don't know the specifics of how Netflix's algorithm works, but they could. I've done things before where it's like you can look at, okay, did they watch it? Yes or no? If it's yes, then you can say that's a success. Or it could be how much did they watch? And you probably want to do that a percentage base, right? Because content can vary from like they have like, some episodes are like 7 minutes long for some of their shorts that they have. But so you go percentage based, and then if they watch more than 50% or they watch like 90%, because like you don't want to include if they don't watch the credits and say that's a failure, then that's a success, and it's okay. Let's put that in the algorithm. They did in fact like that if they even if they didn't leave a rating. So
Yeah.
I don't know. I just found that I find that really interesting.
And it's funny.
It obviously didn't work. So like there's obviously examples of like where you can use it and how best to use it, but it's not always going to work or give you the results that you might be looking for.
But that's the funny part. It did work because I still have that feature. And that's another thing. They've curated that feature to people who use it. I'm one of those people who I do the thumb hand. There's two for like if you really enjoyed it, and then there's one like there's different ones actually. And I'm someone who really does that to curate my Netflix. So therefore, I now have the feature, which I know some of my friends don't have it, where it asks me, "Would you like us to recommend a movie to you?" And I really don't feel like I know what I'm watching, and it's because into the system so much, and that I've created enough habits for them to suggest something. If you're someone who probably never uses that feature, they don't put it on your Netflix.
Yeah, actually an interesting concept, and
Yeah.
another example of personalization, right? They might be doing it where like if you have to have
Yeah.
X number of ratings, and if you have X number of ratings, then enable this feature. Otherwise, don't enable it because it's actually going to lead to a
Yeah.
worse user
Yeah.
experience. And I'm this is me speculating on how the logic has to work on the back end, but I just find it really fascinating on how you can leverage data in order to produce a better user experience.
And I think something that Steve brought up unintentionally is that's the thing. Personalization, I guess you could say a downside, uh, to get to success may involve a lot
Yeah.
of trial and error, right? So part of that, and that's part of getting that user, that's feedback in itself, right? You might do something and it just doesn't work, but you realize it may work, but only for a segment, and then you come up with more ideas like they did. We're like, how about now we come up with a new way of suggesting it to this party and this party? So personalization has a lot of high costs in that way, where like you're gonna have to put a lot into the system and your algorithm and stuff.
Okay,
Like
so that's really helpful. That's about personalization. Some good examples. I mean, the main one being Netflix. You mentioned some others earlier, but I do want to talk about customization. Uh, why should you allow a user to customize? We talked about why you might want to personalize for the user. Now, why would you want to allow a user to customize?
So okay, I'll take this one. So I may be more against customization than Darren is, but I think I wrote out like some specific examples. I tried to like define rules of where I would use customization, because I think the where you would use it, at least at like a large scale, is going to be very narrow. But I think you want to have a complex system that can't be simplified without hurting the UX. That's my first rule. Rule number two: users need to be spending a significant amount of time within the UI. If it's something where they're just going to go there and be there for a few minutes to find something that they're looking for and then bounce, like it's probably not worth it, because like you're not offering any benefits to them at that point. And then the third rule, which is, I guess maybe this doesn't necessarily a rule, but to target a wide variety of different use cases. So there's a lot of software out there. The one that comes to mind for this specifically is project management software. Whether it be, there's Jira, there's ClickUp, there's what, Monday. There's all sorts of different options out there, right, for this. But in most businesses these days, at least in the software development, I can't really speak beyond my realm that I kind of live in. But in that area, there's going to be dashboards, and there's going to be different types of users, and it needs to apply for a variety of different industries. It needs to work for medical, it needs to work for manufacturing, it needs to work for gaming, it needs to work for all of these different situations. And so then, like, then the deciding factor that I thought when it comes to that, as far as like, as opposed to putting a number on how many different use cases, I think it should just be looked at as far as the cost it would take to develop solutions for those different use cases, each different use case having a unique design that is researched and designed for that user group, versus the cost of building the customization effort. Because there is a cost in doing that, into building a UI that can be customized. And so I think that's a deciding factor. I don't think there should be a finite number that is applied to that. And then, so as far as like some examples that meet that criteria, the main one that I think of are dashboards, because the dashboards are by their very nature a summary of information from other more complex screens, right? I'm trying to think of a common dashboard that we see. We see those a lot of times in phones, and to give you a summary of information. Maybe it's data usage or battery usage. It's all displayed on one. Um, it's and then, like I said, the project management software as well is another one where you're going to want to see a summary of tasks that are related specifically to you, while someone that is maybe on more of the management side might want to see an overall summary of how the entire team is doing. That's where customization really comes into play. But there's little things that you can do by just being able to drag the order of things that are on a screen that a user frequently visits. That's important. You see that all the time in like just web browsers, right? If you look at that, and then the ability to organize your bookmarks, right? That's something that's basic customization. That is fairly easy to implement. I mean, we're talking about web browser there, but doing that on a website too, or within an app, that's fairly easy to implement. But you can go way further beyond that, which we see in the project management type software.
Yeah.
Those are like the rules that I defined of where I would apply customization, at least on a large scale.
Yeah, I'll say on a large scale. I'll say I agree with 70% of that. But I would like to state
That
too
means you're
that
30.
like
That means you're 30% wrong,
customizations has been
Steve. Just
around.
say.
Well,
Thanks for the math there.
well, the thing is, customization has been around for a while, right? That's kind of the basis that in today's world, a lot of people have defaulted into their system. It's stuff you don't think about, right? Like profiles. A lot of apps or systems that we use today have profiles built in, right? And being able to change your age, your demographics, and stuff like that, that is a basic level of customization, right? And that is customization. There's some apps that don't have that at all, right? That's considered customization, right? You're giving them control, right? And I like to think of customization too. A part of it is the ability to differentiate uh, something within your system, right? To that user, right? Because I think personalization covers more, like it can cover individuals and groups, but customization is particular to a user, right? So I think when companies that go above and beyond normal customization, I would think about, like, for instance, Instagram at the moment, right? Or Tinder, stuff like that, where there's a lot of things that you can change, right? The ability that pronouns, everyone can add their pronouns, everyone can change their picture, You can add now links in there to your website. All that is customization, right? There's just differentiating you from a different user, right? The ability to change your color. It's simple, but that's still customization, right? You're giving the user control to do that. Because the thing with customization is like you're giving them control. And I think Steve kind of put it too. There's a fine line between doing too much customization and too less, right? Less is just basic functionality things I think some apps just need. But when you're trying to get improve the user experience, you want to be careful not to give people too much control because all you're doing is overwhelming the user and saying, "Huh, this is all on you." You know, so I think you got to be careful there. But that's what I said. I agree with 70% of what Steve was saying, but I don't think that like all those rules necessarily apply because customization is kind of the default for a lot of user experience design or design in general for applications and things. But that's just my opinion.
I'd like to say that I 100% disagree that profiles are a form of
It
customization.
is.
I guess I'll caveat. I think we can find a compromise here. I guess it depends on how if the profile information is being used. Like you mentioned later on, like in LinkedIn with the pronouns, right? That's an example. I think where like you're kind of customizing your appearance to others. But a lot of websites will have, there's like a social side to it, right? If you don't have that social side, which a lot of websites that have profiles do, like you're inputting information, but you're not really customizing the UI in any way to yourself, and you're not definitely not to others if there's no social
So was
aspect.
MySpace
I
where you
was
could like there's a lot more you could change in MySpace if you all remember. Would that be considered customization?
yes.
All the things that you could do?
I consider that customization. That is customization.
Oh yeah.
Facebook highly uses customization. Now they use personalization too, but I'm not going to focus on that. They use a lot of customization, right? Your ability to hide, unhide your content, your privacy changes and stuff like that, which people now may see as basic features for a lot of things because we're in an age where privacy is very important, things like that. But that's customization, right? You can hide your content. You can select it to only be shown to your friends. You can select it to only be shown to the public. It can be like is that all that is customization. So that's what you want to. I don't think you should set defiant rules for customization, right? Or personalization. Although I think personalization takes more work and things and stuff like that to do, but I think customization is should be a bigger part of most apps. But there's apps you can have where like it's all about doing, right? So you don't need technically a profile. You just can have an account and then you're using your product, right? So the case that there's always a need for customization is not true. But that's why I say. But there's a lot of things that we have today that have it, and we're overlooking it because it's something that we use so much now. But that's all
Well, you mentioned
customization.
something. You mentioned Facebook, and you talked about customization, but you sort of mentioned they also do personalization. So I guess that's a I guess a question I want to ask: can a product use both? And how does one win? Why should one win over the other in certain scenarios?
Um, well, I'm gonna keep this very simple and short. In my opinion, all this is based on the fact that you have done a lot of good user research to understand how to implement these two, right? You can't just say I'm gonna do this, and but all this is based on predefined user research. But yes, you can do both. I think YouTube is one that does both, right? They send you recommended videos. It will personalize content based on your viewing habits. So just like Netflix or YouTube would be highly curated to what you're watching over time if you're signed into an account. But you can also customize, right? You can create favorites. You can create lists. You can create playlists to you can watch videos. They give you enough control to be able to watch stuff later and say, I don't want to take time to watch this right now, but I can watch this later. And if you were to become a content creator, then there's a bunch of customization stuff in that sense. But the short answer is yes, you can do both, but none of this matters unless you understand your users and you're trying to figure out like, they want to differentiate content, or they need to be able to organize or list content or have more control of what they're viewing, then yes, I'm gonna add these customization features. But there's a lot here. We don't want to overwhelm them. How about we suggest stuff that they may want to watch that help speed up the process? Personalization. So I think you can use both. You just have to understand your target demographic.
Yeah, and I think too, if you're gonna do both, you definitely need to have a very valid reason to do it, because I think in most cases, and I think we've seen too, where like when Darren and I were arguing a little over like what is customization, there's a high degree of variance on what qualifies as customization and the scale at which you do it. So I think you could definitely do both, even in a small, like a small piece of software that just you're getting off the ground, as opposed to something like YouTube or Facebook,
Mm-hmm.
the big giants that are out there. If you're gonna do both and go heavy into it, that's where I think like that leave that to Amazon, Facebook, YouTube. I think that's like a playground that they should be playing in, unless you have very good data that suggests that you need to do both. Otherwise, I think that you probably you probably spend those resources better elsewhere.
Yeah. Yeah.
But obviously, each situation's unique, so I don't like to apply a one size. I don't think you can apply a one size fit all. I think that's a
Yeah.
general UX rule, is like one size fits all just doesn't
Yeah,
work.
and I think for smaller companies where personalization will come into play, uh, from like a smaller scale would be like emails, right? And stuff like that, personalizing email content that's sent to the user, newsletters, and ads. That's probably the simplest way that a lot of people tend to use personalization if you're not one of those major
And
companies.
actually, ads is a really good segue because they're very controversial, and the data that were people companies are able to get in order to create those ads, and even like even people have said like it's unsettling, right? Knowing what, like I think it was Target maybe that could based on a person's purchases could tell if they were pregnant or not before they even knew if they were pregnant.
Yeah,
So yeah, I mean, there's always lines where you feel like a company may have gone too far, or there's always downsides for both personalization and customization. And I guess that's the next question: what are some of the downsides of either one, as you all see them?
well, I think I mentioned some of the
Yeah,
customization ones, right? Was the fact that you're telling the user this is all on them, right? You don't want to do that. You don't want to make them feel like they have to do a bunch of work just to even use your product, or they have to customize it to the point where like they can't even do anything. And to be honest, most people, I think it's like a statistic, like less than 5% of people actually change their default settings, right, in the app. So most people don't want to customize a lot of information, right? They want to customize things that are important to them or that makes their life easier or instantly changes something, right? Like when he's talking about dashboards and stuff like that, you're curating it to make your ability to use the system easier, right? But no one wants to be, and I think me and Steve worked on projects like onboarding and stuff like that, where like they're like 9 pages long to help customize your experience, but by the time you finish, you're like, I don't want to do this no more, right? You don't want that feeling. And I think he touched on some of the stuff for personalization as well. It's intrusiveness, right? Privacy. That can be a big downside of personalization, in my opinion, and that's probably one of the biggest downsides. You ask people, there's not a lot of downsides, but I would say that's privacy is probably one of the biggest ones.
Yeah, I think that's a good point on the personalization front. And then like I have an example that I hope to get into a little bit later on that, but yeah, we brought up Facebook earlier too. I think that ties into the whole privacy thing a little bit here, right? But he's like you can have like partnerships with different ad companies that are out there that put cookies. Cookies are basically a tracking method for web browsing, and as you browse the internet, this cookie is able to then see what sites you've been to, and then other sites that are partnered with that ad company can see that cookie, can see the data that's on it, and then be able to use that data to personalize the website and display something that might be applicable to you to better sell their services or their products. So you probably, everyone's probably see this at some point in their life if they're really paying attention, where you go and you watch a YouTube video or something like that, or you do some Google search, or you look on some Amazon for some website, then you go somewhere else, and then there's ads that are selling a product that you maybe looked at on Amazon to you, and you're like, oh, well, that's quite the coincidence.
Yeah.
No, it's not a coincidence. That is an example of personalization, and that's where it gets into the ethical argument, I think, that Darren was bringing up there. And yeah, so I do think there's something there, and there are ways that users can combat that. We're starting to see a lot more advertising for VPNs. That's one way to combat that, is to give people privacy. A VPN is basically a way of redirecting your internet connection through another computer, and it could be in a specific region. It could be randomly selected, but the basic point is it's not your computer, and then therefore, like, it makes it harder to track who you are, your personal information, and it helps protect you on the web. So then that's where personalization can fail too, because then all of a sudden, like, oh, I see this user's in, I don't know, Russia or something like that, right? And just like, well, I mean, regardless of like world situations and stuff, like, let's just say like, oh, well, that means like the weather there, it's probably really cold. Let's show them like cold weather products and stuff, right? Or maybe it's just like they're not in our demographic, therefore we don't show them. We're not going to customize it, right? Because we're a U.S. based company. There's a bunch of things that we can get into there.
Yeah. And there's a fine line, because people have to be willing to share the information, right? And it's like, for some products you can't use it unless you share the information. So it's like, are you willing to opt into this, which puts it more in the user's court, right? Like Airbnb uses geo location tracking, stuff like that, to recommend you activities that you are doing based on your stay, right, and stuff like that. But to even use it, you got to opt into geolocation. So it's like, it's a fine line. Is it okay for me to send these things to you, although you only wanted to use it for, booking a stay? So I think there's a fine line that you're just gonna have to ride.
What about when you see, like, when you go on a website and it lets you choose what cookies you want tracked and what types of stuff that you want to receive? Is that customization because you get to choose, or is it personalization because you're still getting, based on what you choose, you're still getting the system sending you information? What is that?
I would say it's both. You're customizing your personalization, right? And at the time you didn't have that option, right? And it's because of all these things and it's probably going to get more advanced than that. But yes, that is practically what that is. And I think I would just like to add, it's not needed, but that is only useful if it's like certain features where, like Steve was talking about, you can stop the sharing of your information with other apps. So you won't have that issue where like you're looking at shoes and you go somewhere else and it appears shoes as well. Stuff like that is useful. But there's also where they show that, and if you click it, then you can't use the app at all. That's totally that's useless, right? It's either you're accepting the terms or you're not accepting the terms. And that's the case where customization can get a little not needed. But go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, I think the whole thing with like the cookie warning, like that, I don't know, like I don't know where I'd put that. That's just a factor of like law, specifically European law, right? That's where it comes from. And that's where it goes into like, you need to display that to everyone, because you don't know necessarily where they're located, which we might get into a little bit later. But another thing I wanted to bring up where personalization can fail is actually the best example is one that we actually just had earlier, in one of the earlier questions about Netflix and that button that would recommend a show for you, right? like that's an example of where personalization can fail, because sometimes even in this digital age that we live in, word of mouth advertising is still highly effective. And so if Darren is like, oh man, Netflix has this new feature and it's a game changer for me, right? It will recommend shows and it's spot on. It works every time. And I'm like, oh, sweet, I got to check that out. And I go and I load my Netflix up. It's not there. Like, what is, how do I get it? What do I do? I don't know, because and that's where personalization could fail. And like Netflix is one example, but if you think of it in terms of, like, I always think when I think of personalization, I think the most natural place to make it resonate with people is an e-commerce website. Darren brought up Amazon earlier. I think Amazon is actually very light on the personalization. I think they can go much, 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 much further. But like so an example being, like, Jane goes to an e-commerce website. She just goes to the homepage. She sees a product on that webpage, and it's like, oh, I think John's really gonna like that product. So she sends the URL of the homepage over to John. John loads up that website. John lives in a different place. He loads it up. That product doesn't show up there. He has no idea what Jane is talking about. And I think there's an example right there where that actually that feature, it's going to lead to if John really wants to find the product, he could probably find it, or he can reach out to Jane and then Jane can help him find it. But it's an example where it's making that user experience isn't as clean as it could be if they were both seeing the same thing at the same time.
Yeah, and I think that's also well, I'm gonna get. I would say personalization can also fail. It's something that people don't think about in customization. I think both is that not only we're thinking about granted, like say just looking on a laptop or just looking on your phone, but also personalize it between each device. And I think you'll notice that with certain streaming services, right? If you use the streaming services on your laptop, it looks one way. If you use it on your phone, it looks a certain way. If you use it on your gaming system like a PlayStation, it looks completely different. And they all work completely different, right? And certain buttons are certain places. The navigation menu is completely different from this one. And I think you got to be careful in that sense too, because you're basically saying to the user, like, they have to relearn to use your product on each different device, right? And I think that's something that I've had. Like, I've used a friend's streaming service like Netflix, right? And I'm like, oh, where's your thing? Mine has categories going this way. What yours doesn't have categories at all? It's because it's on your PlayStation. Why is your PlayStation different than the Xbox Netflix? Like, they're both game systems. They shouldn't be different, but it's because they're trying to personalize it to the demographic they may be using it, right? It might not just be particular user at that point. It's more based on most gamers probably, because of their button controllers, may not be able to access this information easily, so we're not going to put it on here. So like, you got to be careful, I think, in that sense as well.
Okay, so I've got one more question. I'm trying to be sensitive of time here because Deanne, our producer, said that you guys talk too much. I'm just gonna put it out there. Yeah.
Whoa!
Well, maybe
I would
Steve,
never say
not
something
me.
like that, but she specifically said that you guys talk too much. I'm so sorry. The last question I have for you is, how expensive can this be for a company wanting to personalize or customize their user experiences? Where does the cost come in?
Okay. This is the most important statement, I think, if you get out of all of this, right? A customization, enhanced customization, I'm going to use that word, enhanced customization, and personalization features or tools, right? Both do not work unless you already have a usable product, right? These are things that will improve your user experience, assuming you already have a great experience, right? You already have a good product, right? It doesn't fix things that are broken. I think that's one of the most important things here. It's like, if you're thinking, oh, this will help drive more traffic to my website, right? But if they're already not having traffic drove to the website, there's other reasons why first that I think you should explore before even considering personalization or adding more customization tools, like beyond the basics and stuff that you think you may need for your product. So to me, I would say the it's going to cost money and it's extra money. And as Steve mentioned, there's a million ways you can do personalization. There's a million ways you can do customization, from like, browsers, activity spent, geolocation. All that costs a different amount of money, right? And depending on the size of your company, how big you're blowing this up, using from big user groups to small, if you're just targeting like a different countries or communities, right? That's all going to cost different types of money. So I would say this is money that may be added to a budget, right? That already exists. So in my opinion, it can cost a lot of money, but that's assuming you already have a great product.
Yeah. Well, I said it earlier. I'm gonna say it again. One size does not fit all. So I think as far as like how much it's going to cost, like Darren just said it there at the end, right? It depends on how you're going to use it. Like I brought it up before. Darren and I, we had the thing where he 70% disagreed with me, and then I 100% disagreed with him when he was wrong on whatever he said.
I'm
Um,
never wrong, but okay.
uh, I'm joking. I'm joking. But like yeah, it's just that like there's a lot of variance in how these things can be applied to different situations. And so I'm gonna this is for Deanne, who says I talk too much apparently, but like I'm gonna give an example of where personalization can go, and this should give you a good idea of how expensive it could potentially get. The same would be true for customization, but like I think this personalization one, like this is one that I'm particularly passionate about. But I mentioned it before, like e-commerce sites, easiest one to relate to. So let's say it's a patio e-commerce site, and you visit the site for the first time. The site has no idea about who you are, and let's just pretend too you're in a brand new computer on a web browser. You didn't sign in or anything, so there's no cookies, no other tracking stuff that it could be utilizing. Right? It's fresh. There's no data on it. It's completely clean. You go to this website, and you're loading up for the first time. Well, how can the website personalize to you? Well, it can find your IP address, assuming you're not, again, hidden behind a VPN or something like that. And the vast majority of people are not using VPNs for general web browsing. So it gets your IP address. That gives them a general idea of where you're located. And then with that location, the website can make some assumptions. And again, these are assumptions, but and so you have to make decisions on like how much do you want to assume about the user, right? But if it's like this is a patio furniture site, right? So they're probably going to be interested. What's the climate like where you're at? Are there stores that are located nearby? That's another thing. They might also look what in your for as far as where we can track you. What's the general income in the area that you're located at? That's something also that they could find out just by knowing your location. And then so then all that information that we can get from that IP address, that can then connect to a database. This database is something where, like Darren brought up earlier, where AI can get in, machine learning and stuff, where we can kind of build stuff based upon other people in that similar region. But let's just assume in this case that it's all handcrafted. It's all data that's populated by someone. That they're specifically targeting this region, or they're going region by region, right? So then like it's going to compare, okay, we know that this person's in this location. Here's all this stuff. It's going to look at that database, and then it's going to be like, okay, like let's look at the housing type for that general region. What's the weather like in that general region? Again, what's the average income in that region? And then as the site loads, it's going to first look at, okay, what images do we want to prioritize? What type of houses are in that area? So that way we can kind of the user can visualize what the furniture might look like in their house. We can make some assumptions based upon what the housing looks like. Think of like the southeast or the southwest, and how they have the Spanish tile roofs versus basically the rest of the country, right? I don't know. I'm not a roofing expert by any means, okay? But like they have, I just know that they have like unique houses. One of my family used to live down there, compared to the rest of the country. So it gives you a general idea of the type of housing, and we can specifically look at images that have been tagged for that specific region, load those in, and then based upon the information that we gained on the weather, we can load up. We can decide what products we want to show. So we can use the type of weather to show that okay, season. If you're in the southeast, we're going to show you like season all season long. We don't have to worry about cold weather stuff because you got nice weather there all the time. And then the income. Okay, let's say that you're in a low income area. Well, we'll just make the assumption then that you are also low income. Again, assumptions. Okay. And then we're gonna show lower priced products in our product line, and we're gonna load all that in there, and then that's all in things that we can do without knowing anything about you. Now, like Darren brought up before, if you create a profile on that website, you're going to be giving them more information that they can then leverage to then further personalize the website. Some sites like if you think of car manufacturers or dealerships, right? Specifically like the manufacturers, you go there, a lot of them are going to ask you your zip code, because then what they're going to do is they're going to show you cars in your area. But they might be using other data with that too, because again, they're not using the IP address there to get that. They're using they're asking you for a zip code, because then they can be more precise and have to make fewer assumptions, like the whole VPN scenario that we talked about. And then we talked about, like, again, with cookies and stuff, sharing information from other websites. In this scenario, this is all fresh and we know nothing about them. So anyway, the point being, you can see how this could potentially scale and how far you can go to personalize a website, and then, how expensive that can become, or developing an AI or using machine learning. Then, like, we start to make, if you get a significant amount of traffic, and this is, again, we're looking more at like Amazon or these big websites, right? You get a significant amount of traffic so that you can start to put people into different buckets, and then you can be like, okay, you can adjust that on the fly then, so that it adjusts with trends that are going on.
Yeah.
Like, it becomes very powerful that to be able to showcase products, so that way you make it easier from a person coming to the website, even for the first time, and getting them to transact on that website on their first session. Like, that's the whole goal of personalization, at least. And then this is specific to the e-commerce, but you can see hopefully how this applies to other things outside of e-commerce, and how it can just enhance the user experience. And then also where it gets kind of murky with some of those ethical boundaries on privacy that Darren and I were discussing earlier.
Yeah.
That's my rant. That was specifically for you, Deanne, saying that we talk too much. I remember that.
Yeah. My point won't be as long as Steve's there. And I'm not mad at you, Deanne, just to clarify. But I would say, I think Steve's point and how that ties into the money as well is that I think something to think about too when you're thinking about customization and personalization, right? Is that, in a sense, I would say customization comes before personalization, right? And that's why personalization is such a big topic right now, right? It's because customization has been king for so long, right? That was the way that most people said, hey, all right, there's basic things, we want people to customize, but to really give them control, right? And to say, hey, I want to hide things, I want to change things, I want them to dictate what they want to see, right? People's lean heavy on customization, but with the adaption of, like, people now using smartwatches and their mobile phones, right? Adding a lot of customization features is not very conducive to mobile design and mobile phones and stuff like that. Like, I don't know if you try to change like your LinkedIn settings or your Facebook settings. Like, there's a lot of settings, right? And things like that for just personalization. That things you can do with personalization, right? There's some things that you can just kind of, based on their habits, change for them or represent for them, and they could just simply say, yes, I want to do that, and stuff like that. So I would say if you are looking to do one of the two, I think customization is easier and cheaper to implement. But I think when you get to a point where you're adding so much, maybe it's time to actually look at personalization and see what those benefits or things can offer you.
All right. Well, that's good. That's very helpful. I think I understand both of those things better. I'll be looking out for them more when I'm using my various platforms and websites and whatnot. But thank you all again for a spirited discussion at times, and a one where I had to be like this a couple times because Steve was getting into it. But this is Speaking from User Experience, and we are signing off. Thanks a lot, y'all.